Joining us now is Cameron Joseph, Washington bureau chief for the New York Daily News. Cameron, let's start with President Trump. We saw two very different statements, one that came out yesterday and then the tweets that we heard from him today. How is the White House truly responding to all of this, if we really know?
Well, I think this is another case of what Trump's advisors want him to say versus what the president actually comes out and says. And we've seen this time and again, more cautious, careful, scripted, crafted message from the White House. And then the president gets on Twitter and blows it all up. And so basically his criticism of this appointment is hurtful. It could be undermining the investigation. And it definitely doesn't help him politically because it basically politicizes the whole effort. And Republicans I've been talking to up here today weren't exactly pleased about that.
All right, so Cameron, what does this mean for the congressional investigations into Russian meddling and possible collusion?
Well, it complicates things a little bit up here in that now because of his nomination, James Comey, who everyone was hoping to testify up here, it's unclear whether or not he'll be able to, because if he comes up here and talks about his memos with President Trump, or these memos do go to the relevant committees, that could undermine an ongoing investigation at the FBI that could be looking into possible obstruction of justice by the president. And so it's unclear whether we're going to get the answers that a lot of folks up here and a lot of folks across the country were hoping in as timely a fashion. Everyone was hoping that we would see James Comey giving public testimony and explaining what exactly happened, why President Trump fired him from his vantage point. And it's not quite obvious whether or not that's going to happen now. And folks up here are still trying to figure that out. But the investigations are all moving forward on the Hill. And obviously this FBI investigation just got a big shot in the arm. And everyone up here seems pretty pleased about that.
Along those lines, with so many investigations going on, how much might we hear in the coming days as far as new information?
Well, it's really unclear. I mean, we have seen bombshell stories almost every day over the last 2 weeks about this, so I've given up guessing what's going to drop. I feel like we've had an entire rack of shoes drop on us. But at the same time, you know, it looks like things may slow down just a little bit. The big questions right now are whether or not Comey testifies and what he can say, and whether Michael Flynn is going to comply with a subpoena. The former NSA director of Trump, who it came out today, Trump reached out against the advice of his lawyers and said, stay strong. And obviously this whole flare-up has come because Trump reportedly told Comey to lay off Flynn and drop the investigation into whether he did anything wrong. So Flynn, it's looking like, is not complying, and the Senate Intel heads that I talked to today, I was just talking to Senator Warner with some other reporters, the Democrat who heads the committee, and he was saying, you know, it's unclear whether or not Flynn has or has not refused the subpoena of the documents and to come up here. So they're still trying to work that out. So the big question is whether or not he's going to comply. It's looking like he isn't. Which is probably not a good sign for his own, you know, if you have nothing to hide, usually you come out and talk. So it's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. President Trump is going to be talking on camera in a couple hours. I'll be over at the White House for that. And if it's anything like his tweets today, I'm sure we're going to have some interesting lines out of that.
You know, Cameron, you mentioned Trump with Flynn. We haven't seen the president be this loyal to many people. Do we have any sense as to why he has been so loyal to him?
He has been loyal to the people who are really loyal to him mostly, although when they stop being useful to him, sometimes he shoves them aside. It's an open question. I think it's really fascinating that President Trump, even after being forced to fire Flynn, and you know they say he resigned, it was not exactly a resignation, he's still defending him. He is still saying fond things about him. He's privately, right after Flynn was forced out, asking Comey to drop this investigation. Even in recent days has been saying kind things about him, saying what a wonderful man in general he was. And so it's really unclear why he's doing this, because it clearly isn't helping him. And the more we find out about what Flynn did, and you know, another bombshell, a series of huge bombshells we've seen over the last 48 hours, was that Flynn, who hadn't disclosed that he was lobbying for Turkey, had told the transition team, the Trump transition team, that he had done this and hadn't disclosed it. And then they still made him National Security Advisor, which has access to all of the classified intelligence, all the most sensitive details of the U.S. And so that's one problem. The other one was that he had been lobbying for Turkey and then had basically put the kibosh on a plan to arm the Kurds in Syria, which Turkey had vehemently opposed, which is what the Obama administration has done. Now that Flynn's out of the way, they're actually doing that. So there's an obvious conflict of interest there. And the fact that Trump is still defending him, I think it's a real mystery why he's doing that right now.
All right, switching gears just a little bit for you, Cameron, let's talk about the search for the new FBI director. We know that there were candidates meeting with President Trump yesterday. What more do we know about that?
I think it's ongoing, and they've brought a lot of people in. A couple people have taken their names out of the mix. Merrick Garland was one that a lot of Republicans kind of trolling Democrats were pushing for because he would be unimpeachable. Democrats couldn't vote against him. President Obama's Supreme Court pick. But also would open up a judicial seat that Republicans really covet on the circuit court here in D.C. So that would have been big. He's taken his name out. John Cornyn on the other end, a very partisan Republican, is a member of Republican Senate leadership, has a lot of experience, a former Attorney General of the state. But he's taken his name out of the mix. Joe Lieberman was just in for interviews. There are almost a dozen people who have been in for preliminary interviews on this point. We haven't seen President Trump name anybody. There was talk earlier in the week, which feels like forever ago, that they might actually name somebody and nominate somebody this week. I think it becomes a little bit easier for them to do that now that we have a special counsel looking into what exactly happened between Trump's team and the Russians during the election.
Right.
But at the same time, with everything else that's coming out right now and a completely disorganized White House that's really knocked back on its heels, President Trump doesn't seem to really trust many of his advisors right now. It's unclear whether they're going to be able to settle on a name or two to let Trump pick from them.
All right, Cameron Joseph, thank you so much.